Okay, welcome back. So Aave is one of the world's most popular DeFi borrowing and lending platforms, where lenders can earn interest on their assets and borrowers can borrow assets on an over-collateralized basis. Aave invented the concept of a flash loan, where assets can be borrowed, used, and returned in the same transaction without the need for collateral. And its predecessor, ETHLend, launched in 2017 and rebranded to Aave in 2018. The token Aave, AAVE, is used as a governance token where holders of Aave can vote on the direction of the project. So Stani, as CEO and founder of Aave, how did I do? And can you update us with the most recent figures, please?
Hey, Anthony, I think you did pretty well. You described kind of like how Aave could look from a traditional standpoint. What I could actually add is that maybe that I want to even say that the Aave protocol is lending and borrowing protocol per se, because there isn't this kind of like a peer-to-peer interaction. Instead of like decentralized financial protocols are always interactions between smart contracts. So that's the kind of like a nature where users, liquidity providers, or for example, whoever trusts liquidity against the collateral from the protocol, they're actually interacting with smart contract based system as a counterparty. That's like a fascinating difference when we look into compare with the traditional finance. And in terms of like how Aave is governed, it's governed by the community and users, which pretty much means, as you mentioned, is that the Aave team can't arbitrarily change the parameters, for example, risk parameters, what kind of asset could be used as a collateral in the protocol, their interest rate curves, and so forth. Instead, there is this formal governance process where the token holders are coming together and voting and making decisions on the parameters. And this is kind of like an interesting part, because as you supply liquidity into Aave or draw liquidity, you're actually every second getting more distributed governance power. And for the latest kind of like updates, now we have been working on this cross-chain governance functionality. So currently the Aave protocol is deployed in main Ethereum network and also in the Polygon network, and in the future in other side chains and also in layer 2s. And kind of like to be able to govern those other market that doesn't exist in the layer 1, we created this cross-chain governance module where you could actually vote on decisions that are in the Polygon network market and on layer 1 on Ethereum, and that result will be propagated and implemented there in Polygon. So this is kind of like an important feature, not for Aave only, but whole DeFi space, because end of the day, many of the projects will have cross-chain functionality, and this market needs to be governed across whatever networks they are deployed. So that has been something that we've been working upon now.
Gosh, thank you very much. So we went straight in there. So I was told that this conference was open to a wide range of people, so including institutions and individuals, and beginners and advanced. So you threw out a whole bunch of words there. You talked about Polygon or Matic, which is a so-called layer 2 on the Ethereum blockchain. You talked about other blockchains as well. There's lots to unpick. I guess one thing I will unpick is, as a user of Aave, I noticed that there are a number of different liquidity pools, right? So these are smart contract controlled buckets of money, right? Which I can either add to those buckets or I can draw from those buckets. To your earlier point about you're not facilitating peer-to-peer lending. It's not like one user is lending directly to another user. The first user is lending to a smart contract bucket, right, of money. And then other people are drawing from that bucket. So why, and I noticed that when I look at some of these buckets of money on Ethereum versus on the Polygon layer, the interest rates are different, right? So the interest rates for borrowers and for lenders are different, and there's different amounts of money on these buckets. So why Why hasn't this been arbitraged? And is there a way of having like a single bucket for each currency, irrespective of what layers people choose to interact through?
It's an interesting question. I would say that normally we even see similar assets in different markets and activity of and volumes of the supply and demand. I would say end of the day, various markets, they do have their own kind of like a risk and reward profile. So for example, if you deposit assets on Ethereum, you're using the Ethereum security on those transactions, whether it's the Aave protocol that you're interacting with or some other protocol. And then, for example, if you use another sidechain, for example, Matic, the security might be not as kind of like a strong as in Ethereum, because you're using, let's say, proof of stake. There are less validators and so forth. And that has a kind of like a risk reward functionality, which means that you kind of are taking slightly more risk, and that's the way there's those differences. But I think also kind of like arbitrage to happen, there should be efficient markets, and this is something that's happening like outside of Ethereum now, with AMMs being deployed elsewhere, and Polygon ecosystem has seen increase in this. So I think eventually they will get arbitrage to the extent that how much people are willing to take that risk.
Got it. So you're not looking for a protocol level solution to this. You're looking for market participants who are happy to take risks in both pools to arbitrage away those differences in rates.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So moving on to something that might be of interest to institutions. You recently launched Aave Pro. How is this different to the Aave that we all used like last month and the month before?
Yes. So Aave Pro is pretty much a separate market, and it's different because it's kind of like allows to create, I would say, private markets on Ethereum. For example, when you deploy the Aave Pro market, which is happening quite soon, the liquidity is separated completely from the markets that are deployed now in the Aave protocol and are permissionless. So the Aave Pro essentially has this so-called whitelister functionality, which means that the whitelisters can whitelist or blacklist the supply addresses, all the liquidity addresses and liquidator addresses, meaning that if there are some sort of additional requirements from institutions to participate and interact with smart contracts, for example, due to compliance, these whitelisters could actually take into consideration those requirements. So essentially, it will be whitelisted liquidity that is separated from the permissionless Aave markets.
Got it. So fresh buckets with different with liquidity, where participants can be comfortable that they know that all the money going into those buckets and coming out of those buckets are with whitelisted participants.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So kind of like the idea is that it's a market tailored for institutional usage who, for example, might not be able to participate in the permissionless markets for various reasons, and then these whitelisters can actually fulfill the compliance requirements that they might have, the higher risk appetite, and that way they are able to use DeFi. So essentially, you would still have the transparency that public blockchain network provides and smart contract execution compared to the traditional kind of like a paper-based models, and also, of course, like you have kind of like a system where you can add more counterparties and more whitelisters. So the whitelisters, we are looking that custodians might facilitate that function, and they list their users into this network.
Got it. And is there one is it one set of liquidity pools for the Aave Pro, or can there be multiple? Like, are we going to get like a US friendly Aave Pro, a China friendly Aave Pro, or is it just one Aave Pro and one like whitelist? Like, how kind of replicable is this?
Yeah, so the idea it can be replicable because the first market is pretty much between I think essentially with 2 to 3 whitelisters and roughly 30 different participants in the market. That can be of course extended by adding more counterparties there. But essentially the idea is that you could deploy a market, for example, in for Singaporean entities that want to create completely separate market. Maybe someone in Europe, and we have kind of like already initiatives where we are trying to build new markets that are not the first part of the first Aave Pro market. So definitely it will be separate pools essentially.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Yeah, so crypto people have this strange relationship with institutions. I'm not sure whether crypto likes or doesn't like institutions. I guess it depends on the nature of them. And we keep on talking about institutional money's coming. And then when it comes, it's not quite the nirvana we think it should be. So from my understanding of how you've described it, actually the launch of Aave Pro doesn't really impact your retail user who's using the non-pro, like today's version of Aave. Aside from the fact that perhaps you might get arbitrageurs who can span both pools, and you might see some liquidity moving from one to the other. But there's no immediate impact of Aave Pro to a user such as myself, an individual user.
Yeah, it's more of a kind of like a separated market where we actually try to onboard larger users, and essentially the idea is that over time, as these institutions are more comfortable in interacting with decentralized software, maybe that essentially whole DeFi space becomes like a liquidity ocean, and these markets can be always connected if the whitelisters and the governance and market participants are interested in doing that. So I would say it's kind of like a sandbox model for institutions to participate.
Got it. Thank you. And then just finally, the last question on Aave Pro. What kind of institutions do you expect to use them? You said bigger, larger ones, or ones that may not be comfortable with interacting with unwhitelisted smart contracts. And of those institutions that you expect to use the Pro version, what were the main product requirements that they had, and what was hardest for you to execute on?
Yeah, I think maybe kind of like hardest requirements is just to get all of this participants, whitelisters, current like compliance requirements into account, since there's different requirements from everyone, and essentially compliance is just kind of like a mapping out the risk appetite and mitigating all kinds of potential risks. And from this perspective, I would say just coming together and finding a consensus for the risk levels was something that took a bit more time. The technology itself was already available, since there's the Aave protocol, Aave markets are deployed, and there's only what we had to add is the whitelister mechanism. Besides that, pretty much it was just reviewing and understanding between compliance teams what was needed, and also strategically, because it's very difficult to go with a one global market in the beginning, and instead just creating multiple markets and looking for participants in various those markets and categorizing them. But essentially that was the most difficult part. It was actually not the technology itself, but actually understanding like what are the needs of the institutions and where they're coming from, and how to adjust on those.
Got it. So finding overlaps in compliance requirements and needs, and then delivering.
Exactly.
And then do I get to Does this thing exist yet, or are we still in testing?
Yeah, so we're finalizing testing, so we probably will be live within a few weeks from now.
Okay. And will I be, as a retail customer, will I be able to see this on the Aave website, or is this kind of secret and hidden away from me?
It's not hidden because as a public blockchain, everything is visible. So it will be visible in the protocol, kind of like statistics, and the functionality itself is built within those whitelisters user experience. So pretty much that is where how the users are accessing. So if you're part of those whitelisters, then you're able to see it. But nothing stops for anyone to build a front end that actually helps those whitelisted addresses to access.
So anyone in the world can see what's going on. They can calculate the interest rates, the liquidity locked. It's just that they can't interact and use the product unless their address is whitelisted.
Yeah, and how cool is that? Because let's say that you see this kind of like activity, you see the collateralization levels, you see the amount of liquidity, you see the interest rates constantly. That brings just a new realm of transparent finance to.
So this should be a regulator's dream, right? They're able to see in real time all the moving parts of this thing that's facilitating borrowing and lending among private participants.
And also, I usually say that smart contracts are kind of like a killer feature for RegTech, because once you create those, deploy them, they exactly how you have engineered them. So essentially, if you or like there's nothing that comes and breaks them, breaks the design itself. There might be some sort of vulnerabilities or whatnot, but essentially they behave as they are programmed. And then there's the immutability, so you can kind of like trust that not execution. And then there's the governance that if you want actually to change something, you are able to do that. So I definitely think it will add more transparency to the institutional's transactioning, and also it will remove the need of trust or custody. So there is very much kind of like a lot of good potential, I would say. And also because of the amount of transparency, it allows other developers to create better risk management tools as well, as there's more data available to them.
Agreed. Okay, moving on. You've got a legal entity in the UK with an electronic money institution license. What's that for? What does that license let Aave do? And how is that used in the product today, or is it something for the future?
Yeah, so the Aave team builds decentralized protocols like the Aave protocol, and then after our latest version that we are building, we are moving to build kind of like a next protocol that is important for the whole ecosystem. And we also are kind of like, we also have a business that we're building within the UK, where we have the full authorization to do electronic money activities. And the idea is to actually build a business that brings more traditional financial users into the space of using decentralized protocols. And that way we can actually increase the onboarding from traditional economy into the decentralized finance. And that is essentially what we want to achieve. And if the product that we are building works in the UK, we're looking to scale it a bit more across globally.
Got it. Can you walk me through the user experience then of what once the EMI license is kind of being used? What would the user experience be for someone who's maybe not a crypto native? What do they see? What do they do? And what do they get once it's all up and running?
I think what happens is that when you, as a user, you sign up for the application, you can fund your account in traditional currencies and swap those currencies into cryptographic assets, and then you're able to then use decentralized protocols.
It makes you like a wallet or an on-ramp or something like that. Okay, got it.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Okay, let's talk about governance. So you mentioned this at the top of the call. The Aave token can be used for governance. It's also distributed to those who use the product. So users become governors if they use it enough. Can you give some examples of things that like maybe three concrete examples of things that the Aave token holders can vote on, and then a few things where they can't vote on, or not yet, and maybe it's something for a more decentralized future. I'll start you off. Like one thing they can vote for, I think, is the inclusion of another asset in the borrowing in the pool. But
Yes,
give us a few more.
So the Aave community members, they pretty much vote on risk management. So the Aave protocol has risk framework that has been created within the community that determines kind of like how the risks should be managed within the protocol, and every decision making is somehow related to risk management. So it can be adding, as you say, adding a new asset into the protocol to be used as kind of like being able to draw liquidity, or being able to use as a collateral. And there's various risk parameters, like how much you can draw liquidity against that collateral, what could be the liquidation incentive for the liquidators in case that collateral value goes decreases substantially, and also the interest rate curves. And what it means is that the community is setting those risk parameters, so they're voting on how you will kind of like increase and decrease risk depending on the appetite, and at the same time they can actively transfer the risk to themselves by staking Aave into the so-called safety module, where you can get more Aave by subscribing to covering shortfall events. So if there is some sort of a failed liquidation or vulnerability in the smart contracts, that safety module can be actually used to make the protocol whole again. So it's kind of interesting, like a bespoke model to transfer risk. And you can also vote upon how the protocol will evolve in the future, all the changes and smart contract updates and new features. And you can even vote on things that might not require on-chain functionality. It might be related to governance, some sort of a decision how just things should be evolved in the future, but without actually code execution. And of course, there's the Aave protocol itself is sustainable, so it's currently collecting reserve factor into the Aave DAO treasury, and I think there is like a over 10 million worth of reserve factor collected in stable coins mostly, and those funds could be used to further develop the protocol, or contributing to the Aave grants DAO, which gives grants to develop more functionality across the Aave ecosystem. And it showcases that even if the Aave team is not around, there is assets that can be used to hire more developers by the DAO and continue to build a protocol. But the decision making with DAOs, essentially, it can be anything. It doesn't need to be necessarily executable smart contract code that they're voting upon.
Got it. So risk parameters, there's code, there's direction, there's they could vote on hiring and firing. Perhaps there's voting on how effectively how the treasury is spent. All of those things, right? Could they fire you, Stan?
Exactly. Yeah, I guess I don't work for the DAO at all. So everyone pretty much works for themselves, in the sense that actually contributes, because anyone can at any point in time just build code and then put that code proposal on chain with enough vote delegations, and essentially meaning that someone, Antony, from your team, if they find some sort of proposal interesting, or they want to change the way Aave protocol works, maybe make it less riskier or somehow more safer, someone from your team can make a on-chain proposal, and the Aave governance can vote upon it, and you can put some sort of a fee for actually building that functionality. end of the day, an open protocol, and anyone in the community can just participate and contribute building it. So it's kind of works the same way as Linux software. And that's the beauty of the system, because you as a developer, you can decide what you build with, and there's so many protocols out there, so many interesting projects. Of course, I think Aave is quite in a fascinating state now as we are building more resilient protocol. But anyone can essentially build more functionality to Aave.
Got it. And do you know, off the top of your head, I know a sensitive question, what's the minimum number of people needed to say yes to a governance vote and have it pushed through? So I guess it's a question, it's a meta question on like how, actually in real life, how decentralized is the decision making at worst?
Yeah, so there's like a 2% quorum that needs to be reached from the total supply, but the quorum is usually reached quite easily. And I think there's always kind of like a bigger amount of passive voters, because voting costs gas. So there's some sort of like a user friction there. Yeah. But I would say that DeFi in general, like the decision making has been quite decentralized, and many people do not vote because they kind of like a trust.
If it's going their way anyway, there's no point in paying the gas. All right, last 30 seconds, Stani. What are your future plans for Aave? What are we going to see in the coming months?
I think we'll see a bit more innovation, but also we'll see kind of like a new version of the protocol that mitigates more risk. So there's going to be different kinds of risk mitigations tools, such as supply cap, liquidity draw cap, exposure cap, and just trying to make the protocol more resilient to price fluctuations.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you. Stani, thank you very much for joining me. This has been, I've really enjoyed this chat, and I hope the audience has too. Thank you.
Thank you, Antony, for having me here.